Supreme Court that expressly articulated that was this Pierce versus Society of Sisters case. Now, do you notice where this case came from? Stephen?
A little bit of background information. Who's Pierce and who's Society of Sisters?
Well, this was about Oregon's compulsory education law, and somebody wanted to go to a private school. And I don't remember, I think Pierce was Secretary of State, or a public official anyway. So the whole idea was that people wanted to send their kids to private schools, obviously a Catholic school, and the state of Oregon said not so fast, and the Supreme Court said not so fast. Okay. Now, one of the things, a lot of times when you talk with people in public education, you know, they have kind of a tolerance for parents showing up or having any input, because we're not as smart as they are, because we don't have degrees and so on and so on. But if you go back, the U.S. Supreme Court's been pretty clear about who really gets to decide what the kids are taught. And I'll just kind of pile on here. For those that didn't get it in 1925, in 1944, the Supreme Court said, by the way, back in 1925, we said, and for those who are really dense or who have been part of our public education system in more modern times, if you didn't get it in 1925, you didn't get it in 1944, 1972. And this was a situation where the state of Wisconsin wanted Amish kids to go to their public schools. And the Amish said, no. And the state of Wisconsin said, yes. And the Supreme Court said, no. But here's what I think is telling, and this case is cited pretty frequently when you're talking about parental rights and so on like that. Parents' duty to prepare children for additional obligations include the inculcation of moral standards, religious beliefs, and elements of good citizenship. And I think that's significant for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's a recognition by the Supreme Court, even in 1972, that the parents had the primary responsibility. But what they went on to say is the parents have the primary responsibility. Okay? If the parents don't do it, who's going to do it? And I think that's some of what's gone on. So even, you know, you realize here, I mean, where prayer is out of schools and, you know, the slide has started, but even in 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court got it right. But for those who still don't get it.
Well, possibly a difference, Herb, though, is they acknowledge that this is the parents' right, but they also are saying the schools should not do it. And so, like, in the 50s, prior to 1960, the society in general was supportive of parents bringing up their children with Christianity and with morals, which is not what we have today.
Right. Yeah, well, and I think what that reflects is we've got a schizophrenia in our public policy and the way things play out. We pay lip service to certain things, but then we institutionally disregard those things.
Yeah, and that schizophrenia is unstable. It will not last.
Yeah, it's going to tip one way or the other.
Right.
Now, this case, Troxel versus Granville, was kind of notorious when it happened. It came out of the state of Washington, actually. This case, among other things, said that sometimes you prefer the rights of biological grandparents to see their kids, to see grandkids, even if that is sometimes in derogation of their parents' rights. It was kind of weird. But anyhow, again, the U.S. Supreme Court says, remember that language, a child is not a mere creature of the state? It pops up again. Now, all of these decisions, if you read the opinions, they're all pointing back to Pierce versus Society of Sisters, Prince versus Massachusetts. I mean, this is a long line of cases. So, and again, you see, parents have the right and the duty to prepare their kids for what they call additional obligations, but make them good citizens.
And so, this is a good example, though, of one of those unenumerated rights. In other words, we were talking a week ago about what rights do we retain, right? Well, this is one of those rights that we retain, that we did not delegate.
Right. Okay, so for those of you who have been paying attention, you know the parents have the primary responsibility for raising and educating their kids, right? So that means that parents have the right to decide where their kids go to school, right? So the question becomes, recognizing that public education goes way, way back in our history, why do we have a government monopoly on funding of education, and why does the educational establishment resist with every fiber of their being?
Because of the NEA and the unions and people, parents have given up their fundamental rights willingly, probably.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, I won't get into that. That's covered later in this presentation. I'm not going to go that far, but you know, the interesting thing is that we've gotten to a point where we have, again, reflecting the schizophrenia. Okay, parents get the primary right and duty to raise their kids as they see fit, but we're going to make them pay for everybody else's education and pay extra if they want to make a different choice. So, okay? All you need to know about this statement is the beginning of who said it, but
This is why we need to prohibit vouchers.
no. This is why the ACLU will say the vouchers are bad, but
That's what I mean.
yeah. Anybody disagree with the notion they will be molded by whatever education they receive? So, okay, again, looking at this whole school choice thing, I'm just looking primarily at Oregon law. In Oregon, you can homeschool and you can send your kids to private schools, but you got to tell the government you're doing it. Okay? And you have to do certain tests that satisfies the government that you're really doing a good job. Well, what about Prince versus Society of, or Pierce versus Society of Sisters, and Prince versus Massachusetts, and Wisconsin v. Yoder, and Troxel versus Glanville? Where in the heck is that?
Well, not to mention the fact that if your child doesn't pass these tests, the state then argues that it has the right then to force you to put them in the public school, where when they get done they don't pass the tests.
Good point.
Well, and the other thing is, there was a case back on the East Coast, and I don't remember exactly where, I want to say Connecticut, where divorce proceedings, big fight over who got custody of the kids, and the father in that particular case didn't like the fact that his kids were, I think they were going to private school. So he says, I think I ought to have custody, and I think those kids ought to go to, my kids ought to go to public schools. And the judge ordered the kids to public schools. Ridiculous, Stephen.
I find that conduct approved tests periodically, that I find that hilarious, because I will be taking the standardized 10th grade test on Wednesday. I took the SAT 2 weeks ago. I think if I can get above, I think I can get above the 15th percentile of the standardized 10th grade test by the SAT. Just
guessing.
out there.
Yeah. Well, you just have to make sure you go A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. Okay, one other thing I'll just mention in passing. So much for my pointer. Probably 10 years ago, there was a lot of play about the Hatch Amendment, and all kinds of rebellious parents like us were requiring the schools to cough up all the records on their kids, and the schools didn't want to do it, and there was a big hue and cry. But parents do have the statutory right to see their kids' records if they're going to public school.